was kind of almost see. I mean, I know punk is not dead and all that, but it would seem like almost be pretty running out of steam. So it was almost necessary to create like a new form of punk that's gonna kick everybody's ass again, you know. And so we did. You know.
Yeah, of course. And also, I want to ask you, how do the circus skills, such as juggling and acrobatics, of some members of the band influence in the visual experience and energy of Gogol's Bordello live performance, adding a unique element to their show, especially at festivals?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. That kind of thing is there, but it's more than that. It's just like, for example, Sergey. He's a theater director, so it's not so much like, you know, the physicality of it. It's more like you know, positioning on stage and knowing how to interact and improvise. And it's like anybody who's seen Gogol Bordello never, you know, several times, they still never saw it twice. It's always different, not not only because we vary, you know, transform songs all the time, but because idea of musical performance is never to be in one place. In this band, it's not a band that's going to have a script, you know. So that transformation is kind of an ability to improvise is kind of coming from that theater background, you know. So that's where it's most like, you know, strategic power.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. Gracias, Adriana. See you in Vive Latino.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Now I move on with another question. This is from Moises from Punkeando. Moises, por favor.
Hey, Eugene. Moises here. I would like to ask, how do you feel to be one of the fewest artists, well, international artists inside of the festivals, especially considering that this is, considering the background of the festival, that it used to be just for Latin American artists. Now we got this opportunity to have different kind of artists, and that's the first one.
Yeah, well, you know, it's for us it's a natural habitat, you know, especially that, I mean, this kind of a closeness with a Latin audience is something that goes back in our very history of the band. You know, when we were forming, our original following was basically comprised of, you know, yes, Eastern European and French and Italian and, you know, German immigrants, but also Colombian and, you know, Mexican, Ecuadorian, Argentinian, Brazilian immigrants in New York City. Like that was kind of our, that's how we came up. It was actually 50-50 like that. And, you know, and then some people from New York underground scene, like local New Yorkers, cut onto it. But for us, it's like a really natural habitat. So going and playing in a festival that's with an emphasis on Latin artists, it's like coming back home, you know.
Taking that, and especially because Vive Latino is one of the biggest stage on the Latin American scene, the importance of the message of support for different kind of cultures. How do you feel to be with this opportunity? I mean, the band released a song to support Ukraine before. Now you got the opportunity to bring the same message for the Latin Americans that had this kind of hard times. How do you think about it?
Well, it wasn't one song that we dedicated. I mean, a lot of songs are dedicated to it, entire album actually. And yeah, we did the. You're referring to the latest song that we did with New Order, Bernard Sumner.
Yeah.
Solidarity. Yeah, well, that song is in particular very important, and artists, great artists like Bernard Sumner, was one of my main influences in music. Really, I'm a huge Joy Division fan, and Joy Division had like a fundamental influence in me in terms of how to arrange song and how to create the vibe. So, intellectual, great, artistic punk rockers like Joy Division, New Order, they need no explanation to why you need to support Ukraine. And naturally, we collaborate with them. Also, Ministry, Old Jurgensen, Primus, just, there's a whole list of collaborations we did in this last 2 years. So that's a natural state of affairs, really. And the song actually was written by. It was a cover song. It was written by. Solidarity song was originally written by Angelic Upstarts, who's a legendary British punk band, who wrote it in support of solidarity movement in Poland. That was anti-Soviet movement about breaking away from Soviet dictatorship. So we just took that song, farther, and actually we performed it in England on this last tour with the members of Angelic Upstarts. So you see what I'm saying? It's a kind of a naturally evolving artistic collaboration rather than like one song. It's like a whole cultural thing that's going on with us or without us,
Yeah. Okay, that's pretty much from us. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Eugene. See you in Vive Latino.
Thank you.
Moises. Now I move on with Luis from Miskit Radio. Luis, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Adri. Hi.
How are you?
I have a question para nuestros compañeros los medios, les voy a decir. In this song, Shoot of the Story Team, they mention, be aware, persistent, let you demand more respect for humanity. Together, we will be more aligned unity, solidarity. The Vive Latino Festival has always been characterized as a space for the musical culture to make calls to society and social Jesus. In this edition of the festival, will we be able to see the call to solidarity?
Well, of course, but we don't do that. That's kind of what we do. We've been doing it since the first time we got on stage. That's kind of, even if you look at the lineup of the band, it's comprised of musicians from all over the world. Like, what does it say? It's how you say it without saying it. It's like this. It's by working together, by being a collective of artists that's extremely collaborative. And that's kind of like our mentality, kind of cosmopolitan, collaborative, like a tribe of its own, but tribe that's comprised of different representatives. It's like an example why people can actually do well together. That's
Yes.
kind of what Gogol Bordello is.
In this documentary, it's kind of my blog. You mentioned I can't change the world, but at last I can bring some magic. Is correct?
Something like that. That's paraphrasing, obviously, on your part. But yeah, I don't think that music can really change the world. If music could change the world, we'd be living in heaven a long time ago. But it can bring in a transformative state of mind. And obviously people go to see music all the time, live music in particular, because it helps them to remove themselves and be transported into another world, temporary. And while they're there, temporary, chilling in this different world, they regain perspective on some things, you know?
Thanks.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of how it works. And call it magic or sorcery or call it, you know, vibe. That's just semantics, you know? It's
Yeah.
one thing for sure, it works.
Okay.
Thank you, Luis. Now I have a question from my colleague, Jesus Tepepa. He is from Cobalto 60. He's asking you, by having a gypsy influence, do you walk through destiny, fortune, or the paths of the stars?
Sorry, cut out. Well, please, one more time, the question. The sound
Yes.
cut out for a second.
That by having a gypsy influence,
Uh-huh.
do you walk through destiny, fortune, or the paths of the stars? It's a bit more poetic.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's interesting because you know, it's it's you know, there's a lot of mythology and all that, like the word Romani and gypsy evolves so much mythology, and this question is obviously coming from that kind of magical thinking about this mythology. And you know, the interesting part is that you can view all this mythology as kind of you know, folklore and kind of almost maybe even kind of corny. But the thing is that in the same time, there is a bit of destiny involved. I mean, the truth of the story isn't, you know, call it corny or call it folklore or whatever, but the thing is that I do well on the road, as corny as that sounds, much better than a lot of my touring musicians, friends, you know, who are constantly complaining about touring and how difficult it is. For me, it's like, sign me up, I'm there, you know? You know, like, what's there not to like? So go figure, you know, I've discussed this with my family many times, and they're like, oh, it's gypsy blood helping you, you know, but then at the same time, it's like, you know, it's not like we're living in a heyday of gypsy, you know, thriving, you know, caravan rolling times. We're not living in those times. You know, most of the Romanis have been living domesticated lifestyle for centuries at this point. But go figure, you know what I mean? There is perhaps a bit of destiny, because here I come, you know, like 120 shows a year. Honey, I'm home, you know, like everything is fine. Other people are crying about it.
Thank you. Let me just translate really quick for
Okay.
Jesus and the rest of my colleagues.
Okay.
Jesús, él te está respondiendo que sí, ciertamente hay como mucha mitología y pensamiento mágico dentro de tu pregunta. Dice que lo interesante es que puedes ver en este tipo de mitologías como algo folclórico, o quizás algunas personas dirán que es algo cursi, pero al mismo tiempo él sí cree que hay un poco del destino involucrado en esto, porque le va bien en la gira, o sea, cuando sale de gira y él se siente a gusto y se siente contento, dice que le va mejor que a muchos otros de sus compañeros músicos. Entonces, que sí es algo que ha hablado con su familia, que no es como en otros tiempos en el que muchas de las personas romaníes y tal todavía viven en caravanas y siendo un poco nómadas, que ya muchos están domesticados, ¿no? Pero que él sí cree que hay un poco de destino en eso, y que pues también eso es algo que lo ha traído aquí, lo sigue llevando de gira y después de regreso a casa. Thank you, Eugene. Now
Gracias.
I move on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias, Jesus. With another question, this is from Oliver from Weird. Oliver, la voy a decir, okay? He says, how do you describe Gogol Bordello's musical evolution since Boy La Intruder? Is there a starker contrast with 2017's Seekers and Finders?
Yes, there is. In fact, one review that I read said that it sounds like like Eugene Hoots finished conservatory right before he went and recorded Secrets and Finders with Gogol Bordello. Still, but then again, evolution continues after that, and there's one more album came after that last year, Solidarity, which was a complete circle around back to punk and hardcore. So to answer the question, there's a certain spiral, of course, and like everything else in the world, there's a certain spiral the way things develop. The evolution probably goes like this. The first album was, this is the irony of people misunderstanding Gogol Bordello. For them, it appears that, you know, the first album is that's kind of like when I started writing songs and, you know, gathered the band and started thinking and started Gogol Bordello. In real reality, I've been in a band since I was 14 years old. So for 12 years before that, I was recording records and playing in various bands, most of which were punk rock and hardcore bands. I'm not talking about kind of hardcore. I'm talking about full-on metallo-influenced thrash, New York hardcore-influenced hardcore. And, you know, and experimental punk and doing electronic music. So, and starting in Ukraine, all the way back there, you know, and then moving here to the States and continuing here. So in a way, Gogol Bordello was, for me, kind of post-punk, post-hardcore, post-punk, post-electronic, post-industrial project that I started as a songwriter. Okay, like I'm gonna build it, distill my story into storytelling songs and go from there with acoustic guitar. Like that was the first time when I picked up acoustic guitar was then. Like that's not my instrument actually. My instrument was always electric guitar, synthesizer, drums. So that's a kind of great irony of it that, you know, it appears like a starting almost like singer-songwriter. But that was a very new thing for me at that time. And so as Gogol Bordello continued, all these elements that I mentioned of my previous bands, you know, they channeled into it. It became loud. It became more punk. It became more symphonic. It became more, you know, other people brought in all their influences, you know. So I'd say by Seekers and Finders, that was like a full juice of Gogol Bordello, where the classical musicians like, you know, Sergei, our violin player, and, you know, and style of Yuri, who's also virtuoso on accordion, you know, was so formative and so influential that that's like the culmination of the most Baroque Gogol Bordello can get. And then from then on, you know, we got kind of, I'd say that after that, doing that kind of almost sympho punk album, you know, conservatory sympho punk album, if you want to call, you know, we kind of felt like we reached the peak of that idea. And you know, the times transformed, times became more difficult, you know, pandemic, you know, Trump, like all that thing, like the war now. And so it influenced everything to scale back and become more anger-driven hardcore punk again. That's kind of the raw evolution of it, you know? That's the full circle of it.
Thank you for your answer, Eugene.
Yeah.
Now I move on with a question from my colleague Azul del Olmo. She's from Excelsior newspaper. She says, is there any chance that your show in Vive Latino has a new single like the one you made with Bernard Sommer, or maybe a glimpse of a new project that you're working with Casa Gogol Records?
Yes, of course. The song that we did with Bernard Sumner is always part of the set now. That's one of the driving forces of the set. It came out great. Arrangement is very strong. So perhaps at some point, not this time, but at some point, looking forward to perform it with Bernard himself. And Casa Gogol is something that actually I activated this year as a trampoline for younger bands in New York City, And one of those bands is Puzzled Panther right here. I'm wearing the T-shirt, as you can say. As you can see, that's a band that's comprised of young songwriters from New York, Victoria Espinoza and Kay Bontempo, and Brian Chase from Yeah Yeah Yes is playing the drums, and I play guitar, and bass player is Alec Reboya. So it's a kind of to give you insight on that, it's a kind of a band that's just embodies all those New York City influences like Sonic Youth and and Yeah Yeah Yes and Gogol Bordello, of course, but played by younger generation, And I find myself more in a producer seat at this point, as far as that goes.
Thank you for that. Now
Thank
I
you.
have a question from Arnulfo from Síntesis Hidalgo. He says, you've had interesting collaborations, with other type of artists and genres like Madonna. And he says, give me just a moment. Sorry, I'm trying to translate it now. What is it like to join both types of music and both backgrounds and make one single, and unique creation? That will be his first question.
Well, there's certain logic behind any collaboration that we do. I mean, it's not like I don't do collaborations that are like somebody send me a file and like, hey, let's have a feature here. Like that's not my world. It's always a result of a friendship or an artistic connection that was made. And the most collaborations that we have done has always been in person, spending time writing it together. Recently, with Ol Jurgensen from Ministry. Ministry new album is coming out in March, and we wrote a song. Spent all day with Ol Jurgensen in his studio, laying it down, and it was amazing, cathartic experience. Similar with Bernard, we've met. We had an idea, we developed it, we watered this garden of idea, and with Madonna, same thing. We first we made a movie together. She directed the movie where I was acting. And from then on, the idea of collaboration musically came out logically because we're both musicians, simple as that. Especially it was significant because, we got a chance to sing in the Romani language while performing with Madonna at Live Earth, which was a very significant step for Romani community worldwide. I mean, Romani language is something for people outside of communities, like something that they think is, a thing of a past. It's, it's a language from fairy tales, as far as a lot of people know. But it's a real thing. It's a real culture. It's a real worldwide community. And I still get emails about people like Roman is from like Argentina and, or Italy or, or Norway or, Canada going like, wow, I just watched that again, man. Thanks, or, nice Tuke for, representing the culture, it's like, it means a lot to people. So there was that, and that's kind of how we roll. It's usually through a deeper connection,
Thank you. Now I have a question from Hugo. He's from Rock 101. It's a radio station. He is asking that if you can share your position and your thinking about the current situation in Gaza and the Gypsy community.
But those are two different questions.
Yes.
Actually, quite drastically. I mean, Gogol Bordello, as anybody who's been to the shows, seen, our talk about it and our dedications to, abolishing any suffering of any, people caught in a crossfire. What else is there to really, what, anybody has a different opinion or something, like, I don't know anybody who has a different opinion. So, you have to, it's just, the whole thing's got so bundled up that it's impossible to resolve these ideas in any kind of social media space. It's actually quite dysfunctional. So what is the answer? I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. It's gonna go through this ugly course and, figure it's gonna have to run its ugly course some kind of way. And it's not the first time planet sees something terrific, terrifying like that, But, it's also quite strange to see people awakening to, genocide on one side, and then like just 2 hours away in Ukraine, the same thing is going on, and nobody is talking about that. Like, this kind of selective activism is really what gets on the nerves of a lot of people who are actually involved with any kind of activism, So that's kind of how I see it.
Thank you for that input. Now I have Julieta. She's from Skyview magazine. She says, have you adapted to the changes in the way music is sold nowadays? Well, sold, distributed, and consumed. Is it easier for you spreading your music to, a wider audience nowadays?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, it seems that there is, of course, it's easier for, younger musicians to get their music out. It's easier to get it out, but is it easier to get other people to get focused on it? I don't know. Probably not. So there is a bit of good and bad in it, because it's easier to get it out. It's harder to get people actually to focus on it, as I just said. But that's the complexity of it. I mean, it's kind of gonna boil down to live music, because if an artist has 2 million followers, but then they go and play a concert and there's 300 people there, well, there's your answer. But one of your answers. But some artists have 50,000 followers, and you don't play it and it's always sold out. There's a couple thousand people there. So it's like, I deal with this all the time, by putting shows together and finding new artists, and or that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on right now, and I'm curious myself what is going to be the next step of it. But right now, at least, it seems like it's a little bit more figured out than 10 years ago, because 10 years ago, nobody really knew what the fuck is going on. When digital distribution just started, it was like, what is going on?
You're right. Now, another question. This is from Cesar Augusto from Holograma. He says, how do you...
You will see that on like Gypsy Punk's record, there's tons of programmed beats. So people don't really hear it sometimes. But if you really get that record under microscope, you will see how much synthesizers and drum and bass sub bass sounds dropped in, and how electronic music was always part of it. Currently, as you can observe, with Bernard Sumner collaboration, we got one step closer to that again. It was there's some dark synth influence boiling up in there. So that's a kind of insight towards the next thing. There is a chance Gogol Bordello is going to come out with a full-on gypsy punk techno madness album. I think it's time.
Yeah, that would be great.
What we play is basically gypsy punk techno. For those in the know, that's how they see it, because it's transical. We create a trance and then we stay in it for 2 hours. It's the atmosphere of a rave. It's like a hardcore punk show with elements of rave. If you go to Gogol Bordello show, literally, if you film the crowd, you'll be like, it looks like more like a punk and a rave atmosphere together, because it's not as violent and elbowing as hardcore, but it's almost there. Except that everybody's just kind of more in that rave elevated state of mind. Yeah. So we can just kind of it seems like there are some tendencies to drive that idea fully home in near future.
Oh, yes, we will see it pretty soon here in Vive Latino.
It's good to see you're excited.
Yes. I have another question. This is from Cesar from Proceso Magazine, and it also kind of relates with previous questions about, political conscience and so on. He says, Vive Latino is originally a rock festival and traditionally, a place or a festival that has a social conscience. What can you tell us about those necessary messages in this time with, so many things going on politically, socially, so these all problems that you have spoken a little bit about, and how would you maintain, or how can we maintain that commitment with new generations, and these new times where the young people have diverse musical tastes?
Well, this is an essential topic, of course, and it's hard to find people that don't like The Clash. Like, who doesn't? However, it's easy to find people who don't really get into the entire message of The Clash. It's one thing to love Joe Strummer, it's another thing to kind of follow into footprints of Joe Strummer. And personally, I wish more people would, because, this is kind of a very progressive way to be, where music is coming from, where a person, an artist, works as a kind of synthesizer of and an information processing center that brings out, collects all tendencies that needs to be resolved in the world. The world is always full of conflict, more or less, but now it's really full of conflict. And an artist, has a magical capability, and one of my favorite film directors, it's his simple quote. Jim Jarmusch always says, "Oh, musicians are magical people. We need them." It's simple, but it's so true. We need people like Joe Strummer, because by providing that mm, just like resolution in artistic forms of conflicts of the world. It opens up the vision to what can be done further, or showing state of concern, and and the Clash did it really in a right way. You put on a song, here's a song, know your rights, which is probably the most cohesive out of that kind of songs. It's just like, yo, people, know your rights. Do you even know them? Let's go down the list, and I missed music that's made from that point of view. I mean, you can say that Joe Strummer had an advantage because he was a son of a diplomat, and he by the time he was like 15, he's quite aware of things. He's been traveled the world a bit, and when you travel the world, really travel it, is something really important happens. You stop blaming existential problems of humankind on the government, because the existential problems are the same everywhere you go. And so you start differentiating these problems, the basic existential crisis of human condition, that's like a one thing. That's like has nothing to do with the government. Those are like, that's your homework. Like, you do that, and by differentiating these things and seeing what can be actually changed and what can't, is like where that more insightful kind of art comes from, So I think it's essential to follow into footprints of bands like The Clash, Otherwise it's like, people who are not, it's like in ancient Greece, the word idiot, the etymology of word idiot comes from ancient Greece, where that was a description of a person who is not interested in politics. It was like, this is like, well, okay. All right.
And hopefully you will, have the chance to see more of that in Vive Latino. I hope you do have the chance to see more bands and hang out before and after your show there.
Yeah.
So you can see it for yourself. Well, you've been, a few times in Mexico.
Yeah, I have. In fact, a lot of my favorite bands come from Mexico. I mean, one of my favorite bands of all times is El Gran Silencio. Yeah, which had a plenty to say on social consciousness front.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I have another question. This is from Henry. He's from Radio Rage in Colombia. So we have a journalist here from Colombia. He says, how you, with this such intense touring that you do, how do you, manage to compose and create new music, and, also keeping up with your family? And he also says that, when are you planning to go back to Colombia?
Oh, we just had an offer from Colombia, so we almost were there directly after the show of Vive Latino. The show decided to be moved onto later on this year, so we are coming, to answer your question right away. Secondly, it's, as they say, pick what you love and you'll never work a minute in your life. It's kind of like this, some people, if you look at it, if that's not your true calling, then you're, my friend, you're in trouble. Like, don't go on tour. Don't do it. At the same time, or a new band now that I'm working with, Puzzle Panther, they're just discovered, they just went on their first tour this year with Gogol Bordello opening up. But it's a full day workout, but they don't see it as any kind of work. I mean, some people just like, they think that's what it needs to be. Load in some amps and chords and pedals, and get some rum and coke, do sound check, then, you know, get another rum and coke, get on stage, create a spectacle, you know, talk to the new fans, you know. Some people live for like, you get as much luxuries as possible. Some people don't care about that. Like, their luxuries on stage, you know. Their luxuries to be in a bubble of mystical creation, you know. That's the luxury. So that's kind of how I feel. I'm basically describing it from other people, but that's how I feel about it. So I don't consider it to be, to answer your question more directly, is being on tour. And, you know, so, you know, even during sound check, I mean, we work on new music. Like, that's the rehearsal. Like, sound check is the rehearsal.
Correct.
Yeah, because I don't really care so much about sound, actually. I just want to get it. Sound man we have a great sound man. He'll get the sound right. I want to keep moving forward with the musical vision, you know.
Okay, thank you. Now I have a question from Guillermo from Rock Activist. He is asking you, what is your favorite album in your career, and which one will you choose to play at a party?
Which one will choose to play where?
At a party.
Oh, the thing is that, you know, I'm often asked to make like a playlist of Gogol Bordello, like for like, you know, New Zealand, or, you know, where we never been, or something like that. And so I'll sit down and go through some albums, and it's always a chop up salad of things, because, you know, when we play live, we actually keep doing that same method of selecting the best parts of every album. And I guess that's pretty normal method to go. But it's to really see Gogol Bordello, you can never really experience it through the album, because album is a one fraction in that evolution. As when we play a full set, you get to see more ballad, tender side of Gogol Bordello. You know, you know, you can make like a whole ballad album of Gogol Bordello if you like get it out of all albums. The ballad, you know, acoustic songs, you'll find yourself like a full-on album of just that. That's like a big side of this band, you know. But in live progression, you know, in course of 2-hour show, you know, that's probably the only way to experience like full musicality of it, you know. And I think that my favorite album is actually the last one. Yeah, it kind of has a lot of those things brought together and firmly placed firmly sitting in fundamental influences of punk rock and hardcore, you know, and still staying adventurous, you know.
All right, thank you. Now, this is our last question because we are running out of time. This is from Patricia Villanueva. She's from El Heraldo de México newspaper. And it connects a little bit with, you know, one of the previous questions. She says that, how do you see, you know, the new generations, that how much interest is there in punk, or how easy it is to reach them?
Yeah, that's a really kind of a analytical question. That's you know, it would be a mystery to me if I was not out there worldwide doing shows with younger, new up and coming punk rock influenced bands. The answer is that they see differently, but they see it differently, but they still get it. You know, it's you know, the original punk rock was always a lifestyle. you know, and if your punk rock wasn't coming from your lifestyle, you were a total poser. You know, that no longer applies, you know, because class struggle transformed a bit, you know. I mean, we were still coming from like outskirts and living in like, you know, desolate industrial areas, you know, and surviving like street tension and violence and stuff like that. That became of a lesser thing of with like, you know, middle class becoming like the predominant force, of course. And but the quest, you know, for those existential human condition problems, you know, it remains to be in the gist of punk rock more than in any other form of music. And like those problems have not gone away. Like they're not going to be going away anytime soon. You know, young ones come and find themselves trying to deal with the same problems that, you know, that you know, Plato and Jean-Paul Sartre tried to figure out and never got anywhere really. So that's what punk rock deals with, and that's it's not a fashion. You know, there's a lot of kids who look totally absolutely normal, but they're also dealing with these questions, and they're finding themselves listening to this music because in punk rock, you put the song on, and the first words that come out of the singer's mouth is like, I'm talking about good punk rock, is like, who am I? Who are you? Why are we here? What do we do? You know, like, you know, you don't hear that in pop music. You don't hear that in almost any other kind of form of music. That's a distinctly a punk rock department. You know, this is where those things are trying to get solved. And the youth gravitates towards that more philosophical side of punk. So I see it as more intelligent form of music, and that's the gist of it. In fact, just, you know, we were touring with in UK in December, and our tour manager with us was the promoter, you know, from UK who does tour managing of John Lydon, you know, Pill, one of my favorite bands of all times. And, you know, we talked a lot about that and how, and then there was found this whole essay written about philosophical roots and comparisons to Stoic philosophy of punk rock, and how people only now starting to understand the Stoic value of punk rock. Like, it wasn't about shock value. Shock value is a byproduct of being super Stoic. It's showing that you can withstand this. It's showing that you can withstand all this cultural, sociopolitical schlock while it's thrown at you, and you can roll with it. And it's not going to phase you. In fact, you're going to extremize it if you want it, you know? So that's the strength of punk rock. It's showing its stoic bone. And I think that the new generation that's coming now, you know, they're less exposed to street difficulties, but it doesn't take away their, you know, human condition issues by any means. They're actually dealing with, they need more stoicism on that front. And that's why they come to punk rock.
All right. Thank you so much for being today with us, for answering all the questions. We are really looking forward to see you guys very soon, next March 16. Are there any final words that you would like to say to all of us gathered here today?
Well, I started with them. We always love to come and play in Mexico. And as I said, you know, I will look more through the lineup. I saw quite a number of bands that I love, but you know, it's a lot of, as a DJ. I mean, I've been championing, you know, Molotov and, you know, Toy Selector and El Gran Silencio and all the great bands from, you know, from your country for so long that it's always like, yes, this is where that music is coming from. You know, let's build the bridges.
Cool. Well, thank you, and we will keep building bridges.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Have a
having me.
good one.
Definitely.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.